Good evening, everybody. This is the work session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, Tuesday, March the 9th, 2021. We're meeting tonight in a virtual setting because of the pandemic. Accommodations have been made to ensure that the public is able to participate in the meeting. A number of different ways: Franklin TV, City of Franklin website, live stream from Facebook and YouTube accounts. Conference meeting number 1, you can call in 1-312-626-6799, meeting ID 913-7755-3115 with a passcode of 071927. Callers will be unmuted and given an opportunity to comment during the meeting at specific times. There's limited viewing available in City Hall. The public may email comments and questions prior to 3:30 p.m. on the day of the meeting to the recorder at franklintn.gov. Here's the links you need to know: www.youtube.com/user/City of Franklin, Facebook, www.facebook.com/City of Franklin, and franklintn.gov/Franklin TV. We're now called to order. We're going to call the roll. Alderman Barnhill. Alderman Martin, Alderman Schroer,
Sorry, here.
Alderman McClendon.
I'm here, and this is the worst Peloton class ever.
Alderman Speedy.
Here.
Alderman Blanton.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
And Vice Mayor, are you here tonight?
Here.
Okay, everybody's here tonight. We'll now go to item 1 is Resolution 2021-29. Resolution declaring the Board of Mayor and Alderman members shall meet on March 9th, 2021 for work session and conduct essential business by electronic means rather than being required to gather a quorum of the members physically present in the same location because necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the tenancies in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you, Alderman Barnhill. Second by?
Second.
Thank you, Alderman Martin. Any discussion? You ready to vote? Alderman Barnhill.
Yes.
Alderman Martin.
Yes.
Alderman Schroer.
Yes.
Alderman Speedy.
Yes.
Biker McClendon.
Yes.
Alderman Blanton.
Yes.
Alderman Peterson.
Yes.
And Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. We'll now go to citizen comments for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have anyone to make comments tonight? Or do you have any emails?
No emails, so we do have one caller on. We have one caller on the line now. Will caller do you comment?
Okay, no citizen comments tonight. We'll now go to item 2, which is ordinance 2021-01, an ordinance to rezone 140.81 acres from PD .7, so on and so forth, district for the property located south of Goose Creek Bypass, west of Interstate 65, located at 2409 Goose Creek Bypass. And then the next item is the revised development plan. Can we take both of those at the same time? And who's going to speak to those?
That would be me, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone.
Okay. Hey, Joey.
The applicant is proposing a revision to the Berry Farms Chadwell PUD subdivision located at the southwest corner of the Goose Creek Bypass and Interstate 65 junction that does require a rezoning to revise the entitlements for the PD district to 1,650 dwelling units, approximately 1.57 million square feet of commercial space, and 450 hotel rooms. The original concept plan and pattern book for Berry Farms Chadwell were approved in July 2006. Envision Franklin places this parcel in both the regional commerce design concept as well as the neighborhood mixed use design concept. The plan as proposed responds to the recommendations of Envision Franklin through a cohesive design of mixed residential, retail, and office space that provides live-work opportunities in a pedestrian-oriented community. The higher density and larger scale of the development is concentrated along the interstate in the northern section. with the southern section transitioning in height and use to the surrounding neighborhoods of Stream Valley and Goose Creek Estates. The plan provides ample open space and transitionary green space between Berry Farms Chadwell and the neighboring Goose Creek Estates subdivision. There are two modification of standards. The first modification, the applicant is requesting to modify the regulations for monument signage to install 4 freestanding arches over the main thoroughfare in the northern section of Berry Farms Chadwell. The applicant additionally requests that the primary material for these 4 arches be metal. For monument signage, the Franklin zoning ordinance limits the height of signs overall to 8 feet. It additionally limits the primary materials of the monument signs to masonry. Given the size and scale of the development and the proposed locations over a private road, staff can support the request for arch signage. Staff recommends approval of MOS number 1, and it was unanimously recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. For the second modification of standards, the applicant is requesting to modify the storefront regulations for the commercial mixed-use building type to eliminate the knee wall and extend storefront glass down to the ground level. Additionally, the applicant is requesting to modify storefronts requirements for additional flexibility on transom windows being required on all storefronts. Section 6.8 of the Franklin zoning ordinance requires more traditional retail storefronts for this building type. The standards for this storefronts were included in the December 2019 update of the Franklin zoning ordinance, as well as the December 2020 update of the ordinance. So staff will stand with the regulations as specified in the current ordinance and does not recommend support of the proposed modifications for the second modification. And Planning Commission unanimously recommended for disapproval of MOS number 2. Just as consideration, we have received several comments and concerns from neighboring citizens in the Stream Valley regarding the connectivity and construction traffic, as well as the timing of connectivity. Based on the Boyles team's recent submittal of the amended Chadwell development plan, city staff and the Boyle team have agreed upon a phasing plan for the road network for this new subdivision. That phasing plan is a part of your materials if you'd like to review that. With all that in mind, staff recommends approval with conditions and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, comments or questions from the board?
Joey, could you maybe just expand a little bit on the connectivity that we are encouraging that connectivity to Chadwell, but the timing of it is going to be when that development occurs. And I think also, I guess with the east side Southbrook development, that Stream Valley will also have another connection to Lewisburg, and that while ideally we would love to have connection to Goose Creek Estates, that is a county subdivision and they don't want the connectivity. And I think we just have emergency access there as well.
Sure. So the connectivity for the Chadwell, there are 2 connections to Stream Valley. One on Lazy Vale Way, which is closer to the easternmost section of Stream Valley where the apartments and townhomes are. And a second connection to the road that the name escapes me right now, but it just dead ends at the moment. So that's the connections to Chadwell, and both our, all the city staff have reviewed the phasing plan, and the both engineering and fire have made edits to that plan to allow for appropriate connections for emergency access, and then full connections will come later. And then for Southbrook Meadows, I think is the southern section of Southbrook, that also will have an emergency access as part of the development of section 1 of that subdivision, and then a full access to Stream Valley will come along with section 2 of that subdivision.
Mayor, I have a graphic I can share too that may expand.
All right, let me, if the board's through asking questions, I'm glad to recognize you and let you have just a minute, Mr. Gamble.
Mayor, I've got a quick question.
Go ahead, Alderman Schroer.
Yeah. I was trying to find them in the package and couldn't decipher the recommendation, the request for storefront. Can you compare that? I mean, so I could look at it compared to what's in the zoning ordinance? Do you have any kind of a picture of the two?
I do not have an exhibit that shows the two side by side. I can certainly create one in time for the public hearing next month.
Okay, I'd just like to see that, and maybe if Boyle could give a reason for the request, if there are specific usages that might be appropriate for that. It might be interesting to know what that is.
Mr. Mayor, if I could say one thing,
Go ahead, Alderman Peterson.
It is extremely important to consider the phasing of this road network. We're hoping that will handle some of the concerns that have been expressed about this. But it sounds like the staff and the project have come together on some good ideas.
Other comments before I give Mr. Campbell a shot? Okay, give us some clarification there, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And I'm going to start with a little bit more detail, a little bit more information regarding connectivity in this area. You recognize here Stream Valley, which is shown in the darker gray color here. Stream Valley is also on this side adjacent to I-65. There are 2 points of connection that are proposed from Chadwell to Stream Valley. One here is at Lazy Way. We also have this point of connection here that comes back to the first four-way stop there in the Stream Valley subdivision. At this connection here, there will also be a connection out through Southbrook. Southbrook is currently under construction right now. So if you go out there, you'll see earthwork, and this road here is being constructed. So eventually, even before Chadwell's construction is complete, Stream Valley will have 3 access points out to Lewisburg Pike. There is a phasing plan that is a part of our PUD. We have met with engineering, fire, and planning. We have planned the phased infrastructure improvements for our offsite, which is shown here in the upper right. And we have a phasing plan here shown in the bottom left for the roadway infrastructure. Boyle has committed that the roadway connections to Stream Valley would occur during the development and not at the end of the development. They've also committed that all construction access will come from Goose Creek Bypass and not through Stream Valley. So 2 important points to point out, but if you want more detailed information about how this infrastructure will be phased, this sheet provided in the development plan will give that direction. Regarding the modification of standards requests, the first one that we're requesting is regarding monument signage. And this is really to create something special and unique in the Chadwell North section. And there would be 4 points that these arches would span over the main street that would say either Chadwell or, we need to make sure that we have final design and sign off by engineering and fire before we move forward with this, but we'll certainly comply with their concerns for access. I'd like to hand this over to Adam to talk a little bit more about the modification of standards requests regarding the windows and the transoms.
Thanks, Greg. This is Adam Balish with Boyle Investment Company. Hopefully everybody can hear me, but Alderman Schroer, thank you for asking that question a minute ago. So we've been working very closely with the planning department. Obviously, Joey mentioned the fact that the zoning ordinance is relatively new as of the end of 19 and was also updated the end of last year. there is a detail that is specifically drawn, and if Greg, I don't know if you can zoom in or not, but the black and white drawing that's in the center of this page is actually from your zoning ordinance. The images on the left of the page kind of show an example of, I'm sorry, on the black and white drawing, Greg. The left side of that shows a condition where the storefront glass goes all the way to the ground versus the condition on the right where there is a knee wall that has been required. City staff has recommended this knee wall in order to create a base, middle, and top of a building. We think that's appropriate on single-story kind of Main Street architecture, such that you may see on Main Street in downtown Franklin, but on commercial mixed-use buildings that are multiple stories, we don't feel like that knee wall base is a relevant add to create the base of a building, and that the base of the building could still exist within the entirety of the first floor as an example. So if you scroll down, Greg, I believe there's an image of our McEwen building on the bottom of this page, and on the left. So this is an example of a project that we just built at McEwen Town Center on Aspen Grove across from Whole Foods. This is, typically all of our retailers are asking for more and more visibility, more and more glass, more and more storefront, and we're happy to typically provide that. So in these kind of more urban settings where we have mixed use, multiple story buildings, what we are requesting is the ability to take the glass to the ground and not to force that artificial knee wall condition that is currently in the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance also calls out for the requirement of a transom. You can kind of see that in some of the renderings that were above the door, but above the door is fine. We don't necessarily believe that the transom is necessarily required in the storefront glass adjacent to the door. So the images of the grilled cheesery or some of these other images in downtown Franklin show storefront that don't have transoms in the storefront themselves. Of course, the door itself will either need to be tall to go all the way up to that glass or to provide a transom. We're simply asking for that flexibility in order to work more cohesively with the tenants as we fit out these kind of individual spaces for the retailers and users within our project. So we're happy to answer any questions on that. And then we've given this overall presentation several times, but are happy to answer any other questions with regard to the concept of this rezoning and redesign of Chadwell.
Thanks for the clarification. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Yeah, Mayor, this is John. I didn't get the vote of the Planning Commission on the change and modifications for the storefront. What was that?
The Planning Commission recommended unanimously disapproval of the storefront modification.
Okay.
So Adam, question is removing this knee wall, is that a cost saving measure or is that really just something the tenants are asking? And then my second question would be for planning staff is, did the Planning Commission see pictures before they voted on this? I don't think they did.
To answer the first question, Alderman, it actually is a cost increase to take the glass. The glass is more expensive per square foot than the knee wall. So it's really not a cost savings measure that we're trying to incorporate, but simply more from, this really comes into more of the corporate retailers. A lot of times with our more local, smaller retailers, they certainly prefer that kind of Main Street down home look, but in this more urban setting where we may have multiple story buildings, we don't necessarily think that is a one size fits all solution across the board. What's interesting now at Berry Farms, we actually have knee walls on all of our retail storefronts at Berry Farms today. So it's not to say we wouldn't do it. We are just looking for that flexibility moving forward.
Yeah, my comment to everyone is I like the diversity and the flexibility. I don't like everything looking the same. I think that is not how Franklin ought to be in any situation. There ought to be options available to people. I do know, because I'm in this business, I compete with them occasionally in a much smaller scale, let me say. But, tenants, not that they should demand everything, but they like flexibility. And sometimes it really helps to draw the right kind of tenants to give them the ability to design, their spaces. It's not Main Street. I understand we want Main Street to keep a kind of a certain image to some degree, but this is totally different. As said, this is an urban setting, which has a whole different feel to it than downtown Main Street. And I don't see any reason, it's not like Boyle's going to, pardon my French, screw this up. I mean, it just gives them an option to have some diversity within their development. I think it's attractive. There's nothing unattractive of what they're trying to do, that's for sure. So it's either we want everything to look alike, or we want it to have the option to look different. And I would prefer looking different and having the ability to look at these things and giving the developer some options.
Mr. Mayor, if I could say, at the Planning Commission, I think that the Planning Commissioners just, in some respects, went along with the staff recommendation. I don't know that there was a little discussion, but I think that probably was, we're just going along with that. And it is in our ordinance.
Mayor.
Go ahead, Alderman Barnhill.
Just looking at the examples that were presented with the wall and with the glass, I really found the glass to be more attractive than just the wall, the knee wall, and the glass there. And I don't know whether attractive is a criteria or not, but I would lean towards some flexibility there and allow them some flexibility. I agree with Alderman Shore that not looking the same is not necessarily good. It's not necessarily bad either, but I really did like the glass all the way to the floor level.
Other comments or questions?
Sure.
Go ahead, Sammy.
Well, I'm fine with the flexibility of the frontage glass or the knee wall, but nobody's really commenting on the arches. And I know we don't want those everywhere because then everybody would be the same, but I love the deviation from the norm. And I think it makes the development more attractive. I also think it makes a landmark for people to recognize the space. So I know we set out rules and regulations and do's and don'ts, but we also accept modification of standards for this reason. And I think having some diversity in our design sets us apart. So I don't have a problem with either.
Yeah, I would just ditto all of what Brandy said and what Alderman Shore said.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. Item number 4, draft resolution 2020-29, a resolution declaring city-owned property located at 403-405 Fifth Avenue North, known as the Hill property, surplus real property, abandoning such property, declaring a public purpose of the property, and establishing a public process by which a new owner will be selected.
Mr. Mayor and board, this is an item we talked a little bit about several months ago. We've done some work on this, looking specifically at the issue around the value of the property and the fact that 39% of it is owned by our water utility. So we've given that some thought. We want to frame the next steps in this process, which is a a more formal, structured letter of interest process, and I'd like to have staff walk that through for you. But probably the primary place where we need some policy direction is how you want to deal with land value relative to this project and relative to the public purpose you've identified, which is establishing a neighborhood that has affordable and workforce housing integrated in it. So I'll have our staff walk you through that, and we look forward to this discussion and your guidance on it.
Good evening, everyone. This is Tom, and I think I'm going to try to share my screen to bring up. Got a few PowerPoint slides here that hope will quickly get to the, just as Eric's mentioned, we've touched on this for quite a while now, so we can move through the basics quickly. Once again, this is disposal of surplus real property. There are 3 items that are required in the municipal code. One, and those are covered in this draft resolution. And it is still a draft because we are seeking some specific guidance from the board for a couple of items. But there's 3 items that are covered. One, first, declare the property surplus. Second, to identify the public purpose or benefit for the property, which, as Eric mentioned, specifically in this case, the public purpose is the production of low and moderate income housing. And then third is to establish the public process by which the new owner or owners will be chosen. With the first couple of items are pretty straightforward. Declaring the property surplus and identifying the purpose are pretty well taken care of. As expected, the details of the public process are challenging, and we got to that point. We previously were talking to you about this specifically in May of last year, and in that discussion, there was concern about the value of the land and what the city ultimately might be giving for this development. We did have an appraisal done for the property in early 2020 that determined the value of the land at $1.2 million. As Eric mentioned, we do not want the water fund to lose the value that is represented by the share of the property that is owned by the water fund. And once again, that's 39%, which 39% of $1.2 million is $479,700. And as we were working on the details of the public process, as staff, we were exploring the options to cover that $479,000 to keep the water fund whole in this process. We wanted to keep it simple. And so we have these 3 options to hopefully generate some discussion. The easiest and most straightforward option would be to require the new owner to pay the City of Franklin Water Fund the $479,000. That could be an immediate payment, or it could be something that we set up over time. The second option would be for the city, and there again, this is an option to keep the water fund whole. But that would be the city make an additional contribution of $479,700 from the general fund to the water fund. And of course, the third option would be a compromise between those 2 extremes. That's our basic question and guidance that we're seeking, but I want to move on for a second and then come back to this. Just to talk about what's next. As you saw, if you reviewed the resolution draft that's before you, we've got a placeholder in that resolution right now to seek guidance on how to proceed on the question of compensation for the water fund. With approval of the resolution, staff will reissue the RFP to identify potential partners to develop the property in terms of a new owner. Staff will review the responses. We'll interact with the applicants to prepare a development agreement that would come back to the board, of course, with the development agreement would come back along with the development plan for the property. Let's see, following the BOMA decision on selecting the developer / future owner, we would have an extensive development agreement. And just one note that we felt important to bring up to you here is that that agreement would include a reversionary clause whereby the ownership of the property would revert to the city if the developer fails to meet the requirements. A couple of the requirements I wanted to point out to you, I apologize I don't have those in the slide presentation, but one of the first steps in terms of timing, with the letters of interest, we would expect the applicants or the respondents to be willing and able to submit a development plan within 6 months of being selected by the board as the new owner or developer of the property. And one of the other items I wanted to touch on in terms of timing, we would expect the new owner to submit for approval a site plan and obtain a grading permit and commence work on site within 2 years of the date of the BOMA approval of the development plan. That concludes the things I wanted to cover right now. I will go back one slide. I don't know if we need to keep that up there in terms of water fund options. It's pretty simple. Mr. Girth, I don't know if you want to have another comment right now. And I know John Besser, the chairman of our housing commission, is on the line, and he wanted to make some comments this evening also. I will stop sharing and come back to this if you would like me to.
Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Girth, and then I'm going to ask John Besser if he wants to make some brief comments, and we'll turn it over to the board for their comments and direction as far as how they feel that reimbursement should occur.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for running through this and working with Bill and our law department to put this in a format that allows us to move this development forward. But as you can see, as Tom mentioned, there's a lot of approvals that will come back through the Planning Commission and board on a development plan and any type of a development agreement, of course. So we have a ways to go to navigate this. And I just wanted to assure you that we will be coming back to the board to keep you updated all along the way. Thank you.
John, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm here on behalf of the Housing Commission, and we want to show our support for this draft resolution, particularly the designation for the construction of low and moderate income housing. As our city has grown and our city has become a destination for corporate headquarters and regional offices, we have seen our population expand in all areas of the city. There are many housing options available to senior managers and executives of these companies who choose to move to Franklin. Due to the housing values, middle managers and support staff often find limiting housing options available due to the high cost of ownership and rental rates that we have in our city. A lot of times, these middle managers and staff choose to move to other surrounding neighborhoods and cities in order to find more affordable housing. Additionally, there are many professionals in the city making $85,000 and less that are living in these communities as well. And they would like to live in the city, being close to work and closer to our great schools. There are both economic and transportation issues along with this. People living in the city, of course, their disposable income stays in the city, and we get the value of that for our own businesses. In addition, there's less traffic burden from people living in the city. The draft resolution is a beginning step in providing up to 30 homes, as we have seen in the past, in the city Together with the recently passed incentive ordinance for affordable home purchase and rentals, this gives additional options throughout the city for a wider selection of home prices for our citizens to choose from. Envision Franklin also supports this vision by directing the future value in a way that strengthens and creates exceptional places for our citizens. Encouraging, supporting, and implementing a wide variety and range of housing prices opens our city to many wide spectrum of citizens and adds to the vitality of our community and assures the continued growth in the future. The Housing Commission supports and encourages the support of this draft resolution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Let's just go down the line and see how everybody thinks we should handle this as far as the reimbursement. So Alderman Barnhill.
Yeah, I've got some questions, and certainly I had thought all along, first off, I had thought that the value of the property at one time was slightly more than that. We had an appraisal, but I'm not in disagreement with the appraisal. Number two, I thought we were looking at workforce housing, not affordable housing. And to me, there is a distinction between the two. And number three, I would not support item 2 or 3 on this, the city making a contribution. I say this with tongue in cheek. I may have mellowed some in the years that I've been on the board, but I'm not going to give away $1.23 million and pay $480,000 in order to do that. So I'm in agreement with one, require the new owner developer to pay the city of Franklin Water and Sewer Fund the $479,700, and we'll work through the other issues. But I did, and this is, like I said, this is from past memory, think that we were looking at workforce housing. To me, there's a difference. I think there's a difference in the income levels and what we were targeting it for. But if I'm wrong, I stand to be corrected. But I would not support giving $480,000 to give away $1.23 million worth of property. So item 1, require the new developer would be what I would support in this. I would support the ordinance overall from that standpoint. Then,
Mr. Mayor. Let me just address, if that's okay, a couple things that Alderman Barnhill touched on. One, there were multiple appraisals done. This more recent appraisal is related to housing development of this nature. We did a broader series of appraisals that could have involved different types of uses. So there was more of a range, and one of those did exceed this amount at one point. But this is more tailored to current conditions and this specific use. So that hopefully that helps clarify that. And I do believe the way we have talked about this is it would be a blend of affordable and workforce housing together. That's part of what I think the city's trying to demonstrate, is that you can have a variety of types of price points, both in that affordable and workforce range together in a cohesive neighborhood that works. That part of why you're doing this is not only to provide the units, but to provide an example that can work. So I believe that's how it was envisioned. So it's a mix of those. So you're right, workforce was part of it, but it's part of a blend. And then the other is just your policy direction, and we welcome that. Thank you.
Alderman Martin.
Well, I'm very conflicted about this because, as you know, I was very much opposed to any residential on the Hill. Still am. But the board wished to do this. And I just think if you're going to do it, I would hate to see that whoever decides to do this development has to pay a lot of money to do it. I think if we're going to get in that business, then we need to get in that business. And I would be for, I'm not saying not take anything, but I certainly wouldn't want them to be out very much money at all, or I think we're defeating our purpose.
Alderman Schroer.
Couple questions. How large is that piece of property?
Tom, do you have an exact number? I think it's around 4 acres. Is that right? Do you remember?
Sorry, I don't recall exactly.
Okay.
I can get you that. It's somewhere in that range.
Okay. And then I heard someone mention 30 units. I don't know, is that is there a maximum number as far as any zoning that's on that piece of property about the number of units that can be put on there? Or would that be up to us if they submitted a site plan?
Ultimately, that would be up to you. That is reflective of a site plan that staff developed, sort of looking at what could work, how the infrastructure and the units could work. So it is it's the concept that the board basically identified, but I think that would be something that you would look to this development partner to identify what they thought, but this seemed to be a realistic number from our review of the property.
So if it were 30 acres and they paid the $479,000, that's about $16,000 a unit for cost of land. I'm mixed. I hate to say it, but I agree with Clyde to some degree that I don't know if I really think the water fund ought to pay for that, and I think the water fund ought to be whole. And then the question is how committed is the city to do this? I believe in affordable and workforce housing, but I also believe that there has to be contributions from all sides. And I would like to, to one degree, instead of saying, we can put all sorts of options in the RFP, and we can say, here's the land. We've got to reimburse the water department $479,000. We're going to, look at everybody's proposal and pick the one that's best for the city and for, the people that are going to live there, and have them make a proposal. I mean, there may be a developer that has the ability to build something and maybe doesn't need to make as much money as the other developer might make. And so, they can come to us. I don't think we should set how we want it. I think we should give that option to the developer and let them give proposals, and then let us decide, which one is the best one for that piece of property in the city. We're really, already right off the bat saying, here's what we want. But, developers, as we all know, me being excluded, are very creative, and they come up with all sorts of ideas. And I'd hate to tie somebody's hands or, give somebody, say, this has to be done this way, when there may be another option that's out there that we're not aware of. And so I'd like to leave it open, and then we don't have to make that decision now. We can make it later on. That's my thoughts.
Alderman Speedy.
And Mayor, just before we move off, our Cracker Jack staff working in the background, Kathleen just sent me a text and said that the size of the property is approximately 5.67 acres.
Thank you for that clarification. Alderman Speedy.
Yeah, I guess I would be in favor of option one, keeping the water and sewer fund, enterprise fund whole. And then, I do like the fact that we're talking about a variety of homes, affordable workforce. I think when we get to the development that, we need to allow the amount of density so that we can get, the number of units we need up there to make it work. And, I know in the past too, we've had a couple of very worthy and great nonprofits want to have some space up there, but I do think this needs to be 100% housing and really get as many units as we can up there.
Alderman McClendon.
I don't know. I don't know how we got the appraisal numbers. Seems to me that those appraisal numbers would have had to have been built on some assumption. I'm not sure what assumptions were made, but I guarantee you it wasn't assumed to be a lift station and a repair shop. So I don't know what the appraisal presumptions were, but seems to me we could either remove or the Board of Mayor and Alderman's decision on zoning could breathe life into that value or suck it right out. But be that as it may, whatever it's worth, under whatever assumptions. I think the enterprise fund ought to be made whole. I think the enterprise fund ought to be made whole right away. I don't know at what point a developer can make affordable or workforce houses after they've done that. I'd be interested to know that. I've lost you now. There we go. I do think that as long as the mission here remains that we are going to, the outcome is going to be affordable workforce housing with some kind of community. I want something more. I've said this many times. I don't want this to just be a bunch of places that don't cost a ton of money to live. I think this is an opportunity to create some community synergy. And I think that we would be making a mistake if we just tried to cram as many residences as possible up there. I would like to see something that the community, and not just the people that live on the hill, but that the community as a whole could use up there. Some kind of space that could be used for public gatherings and meetings and so forth. As long as that remains the outcome, then, I'm going to support whatever process and method we need to get there, because I do think that this remains an opportunity to demonstrate that workforce and affordable housing can be done in a way that is attractive and desirable, and that adds to the community. And that, as long as that is our mission here, then I'm going to support it by whatever means are necessary.
Alderman Blanton.
I love my Dana, but I disagree on the community, because I think that we have neighborhoods that don't open up their community centers for the public. I do think, though, there is a truce in the matter, Dana, and if there is a playground that could access by the public. I know there's been some talking of putting it across from Sonic. I don't know necessarily that's the best place, but maybe if there is something like that, like a pocket park that's accessible, that's different. Because I think these homeowners, as they qualify, as they go through the process, and all of us know the hardest thing you'll ever do is buy a house, and getting to the finish line of that, and then wanting to have pride in your home that it's similar or comparable to living anywhere else. It's just you got a better price. I think that adding access to the public in a community center that's amongst that development almost brings in, I mean, I hate to say it, but almost an element of shame, that it's like, here's your house, but this is for everyone else. And I don't like that. I think as it's going down the roll, I think that we're all unanimous that the enterprise fund needs to be reimbursed. I totally agree with that. I also agree with Clyde's point that we don't need to lose 1.2 and spend that money. So I think that's wisdom, Clyde. Thank you for that. But I think of course, this makes me think of Pearl, and I would have loved to hear what her words would have been on the subject. But this is something that we've all been working towards for a long time. And I think that we're pushing further and further towards the goal line. And I would love to see a score. So.
Alderman Peterson.
Well, first of all, about the water fund, remember the City of Franklin water is not the same thing as all the residents in the City of Franklin. There's a number of other water utility districts in our city. So I think that they certainly need to get the money that their part of it would go to. Whether that's the right appraisal or not, I do not know. I'm not sure that I think that the city should, just come out of the general fund to pay for that. But there's so many things, and whenever we're talking about the amount of money per dwelling unit, if we're talking about the 30, hey, that's nothing compared to, all the other impact fees that would be, involved in all the other aspects of this too. So, we're really talking about someone who, a development where there would be a lot of things that they would be getting as opposed to what somebody who's just building a regular development would get. That's the main thing that I want to talk about, although there are a lot of other aspects of it. And I do think that we need to consider a lot of different things.
Vice Mayor.
There's a lot of wisdom here tonight. And I think a lot of great things were said by all the aldermen. So I'm not going to belabor those points, but I will say that I do support keeping the enterprise fund whole. I'm not interested in the city being in the housing business, and I think we have to be very careful there that we don't get sucked into being in the housing business. But I would definitely support the $480,000 making that enterprise fund whole. And also, as far as the public space, I really don't support the community center at all. I think Brandy had some words of wisdom there, but I do support a playground area that I think that really is a must for that area if we're going to have families up there. And what you can do is in that playground area, you could also put a covered pavilion. Whoever develops there can construct a covered pavilion, which could be a gathering space for the people that live there. You can have some picnics up there. They can have family gatherings there. Kids can play. I think that space is really needed in any subdivision, any community, any housing area. So that's what I would support in that. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you for being succinct. I would agree with everybody that I think we need to make the utility whole as far as the $479,000 plus. I think Alderman Peterson made a very good point about we will be, based on the most recent ordinance that we passed as far as incentivizing housing, there is going to be some additional forgiveness that we'll have to pull out of the general fund. I'd like my memory refreshed on kind of what that would be based on 30 units.
Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
We will get back to everybody prior to the next meeting with a response to your question, and also to Alderman Shore's question about the units. When we first started this conversation a couple of years ago, we had a consultant look at the property and do a couple renditions of what could occur as far as units on the hill that would comply with our development regulations. And that's how we arrived at that number, and we'll share those with you as well. I do want to say thank you for the guidance on making the water fund whole, and also thank you on the guidance for it being more inclusive of affordable and workforce units. We will amend the resolution accordingly. But the last thing I want to say, while this is not an uncommon and difficult decision for any community, we have a staff and a housing commission that will work to remove barriers to make this reality. And we'll build upon it as we go forward as a community. And there's a lot more discussion ahead on this, and we will certainly bring you along in those decisions. Thank you.
And thank you. It's okay with everybody. We'll move to item 5, which is Amendment 1 to City of Franklin Contract 2020-0055, Near Site Clinic Healthcare Services Urgent Team name change to Ascension St. Thomas and renewal of the contract for FY 2022. Any questions about that one?
Mr. Mayor, if we could, I know Kevin has some statistics that if we could just take a minute to highlight that, we're really pleased with the amount of usage and the role this played for our team members generally, but specifically as it related to the COVID issues and the ability it provided us to provide quick testing with limited wait time and just the support it provided our team was, we expected it to be helpful, but it really went above and beyond that because of the need it fulfilled that we did not fully anticipate when we went into this a little over a year and a half ago. So if Kevin could just take a minute or two, just share that with the board and with the community, I think that would be good to see.
We'd love to hear from Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to put up just a couple of PowerPoint slides, 4 PowerPoint slides. Now, on this first one, we're just going to pause there for a second. I want just to remind this body that the goal and objective here was to have a near-site clinic or an on-site clinic or a mobile clinic. We ended up having the near-site clinic. And that was, we wanted a place where we'd send our employees and reduce their lost time and their absence from work. We want a convenient location. This is convenient. This is, as we discussed last time, the old Mickey Roos location. We wanted to manage worksite injuries, send our people who have workers' comp injuries there. We wanted to reduce out-of-pocket costs for our employees and their families. We wanted to bolster the city's brand as an employer of choice. And another step towards creating a business culture that shows the city cares about the health and wellness of their employees. And so we found that in urgent care, urgent team, which now has a new name. Urgent team now has been bought out by Ascension St. Thomas. So that's one reason we need to amend the contract. But I'll now go through on slide number 2 and just remind you a couple other things. The core pricing, the core service pricing is as you see there. We notify the entity of the people simply on our plan. Whether it's employee only, we pay $20, employee plus spouse, $35, employee plus children, $35, and family, $50. So that's part of the model. I'll go now to the next slide. The utilization. And you'll see here, this is where Eric was talking about, this has been a big hit with our employees. And we're using the stats starting in July of last year. So it'll have a nice fiscal year wrap when we get all the numbers in. But you'll see for acute care, and that's, obviously if an employee is sick, 391 visits. For preventative care, that's more of an annual physical. We just had 1 visit. For workers' comp injuries, on-the-job injuries, 33 visits. Occupational medicine, and that's another form of workers' comp. That's more the initial workers' comp visit, 96 initial ones. For lab visits and other, that would be for blood work because someone's not feeling well. 63 visits. Biometric screenings, we didn't have anyone going for that. That's when you want to get your blood work checked just because you're not feeling well. Drug screens, we didn't have as much of that this year because of COVID. I anticipate that'll go back to normal once we have more active hiring. But drug screens, 51 times that was used. That's included also for random drug tests. Breath alcohol screens, that's when there's an accident and we want to check to make sure the employee was not intoxicated. Big number here, COVID-19 tests. We sent 381 employees there. It's real convenient, it's real close by, it worked out well. Again, last year it was different because we didn't have as much hiring during that time period. So the pre-employment physicals, we had 15. Realize we don't use urgent team, or which is now Ascension, for pre-employment physicals when it comes to PD or fire. It's for everyone else. Then flu vaccinations. And yes, we have flu vaccination clinics here at City Hall. You see 61 visits there. That could be the dependents of our employees or employees who had to miss out on the couple times we had it here at City Hall. And you see an additional 5 other vaccinations. Those are usually dependents who are getting vaccinations for school-related things, MMR, tetanus, that sort of stuff. So now I'll go to the next slide, slide 4. I want to show you the breakdown. And of course, when we say PEPM, that's the cost per employee per month, you'll see that it ranges to roughly $26,000 every month. And that's just for the calculation I told you at first, when based on whether you're single or family, we pay a certain amount to the entity. Then we pay that next part, you have to add that with the pass-through charges. The employee only pays $20, no matter what it is, a broken arm, stitches, setting an arm. The employee is only paying $20. City of Franklin pays the rest. And you'll see that came up to it's about $4,400 in terms of pass-through charges, plus the $180 of our total PEPM charges, which breaks it out to $184,000, which is right at $37 per employee per month. And you'll see that, we haven't had the full year yet, but we estimated that the pricing proposal would hit about $315,000, almost $314,000, and we're right on track to hit that number. So I appreciate you giving me a little bit of time to tell you that, yes, we'd like you to go ahead and sign once because of the name change, but also extended period of time. But I want to use this opportunity to tell you that this has been a real big hit. And I think that with COVID, we're not able to really tell you exactly at this juncture if we actually were able to realize some savings. I think we're going to realize that it did, but we'll have on a more typical year, I'll really be able to talk about savings. But anyway, those are the numbers I want to give you on the near site clinic. Thank you.
Yeah, great analysis. Any questions for Kevin?
I'd like a comment.
Sure, go ahead, Alderman Blanton.
So I've received 4 negative COVID tests from this wonderful establishment. And I told him, I said, I see you more than I see my general physician, but they are top notch. They are incredibly kind and gracious and thorough. And I wasn't quite sold on this in the beginning, but I love it. So thank you so much, Kevin.
Are we sure they're accurate?
Well, let's hope so.
We'll keep moving along then. Thank you. Next is ordinance 2021-02, an ordinance to amend Title 18 Water and Sewer of Franklin Municipal Code, specifically sections 18-108, 18-208, 18-209, and 18-409 for clarifying the final approval for the design and physical location of the Water Management Department's water, sanitary sewer, and reclaimed water infrastructure. Who's got that one?
I do, Mayor. Thank you. And it's really a very simple amendment. What we've experienced with some of the mixed-use developments that have been proposed to the city, that developers are trying to install infrastructure that eventually becomes an asset of the city at the most convenient and cost-effective location. And that means that it might not be in a location that can be easily and efficiently maintained by the city. It's not our goal to increase costs on any development, but any asset, sewer and water, roads, that eventually parks, that eventually become an asset of the city that we're going to be responsible to maintain, even upsize at some point, that we want it in a location that can be done efficiently and cost effectively. And that's what this amendment does. Thank you.
Any questions? Item number 7, amendment to City of Franklin Contract 2020-0012 with Hazen for communication services support for the Southeast Park and wastewater capacity evaluation.
Hi there. So this is an amendment with Hazen, who is our consultant performing the work on the Southeast wastewater capacity study on the in the Southeast part of town. This is an amendment that Water has been working with Parks quite a bit on to take the branding concept that was started during the initial Parks work, kind of taking that a little bit further and using in developing a logo that can be used for publication materials. So the scope has several different concepts. That's kind of the main one of the main concepts of it. So the first part would be, as we look to brand this facility and we look at public communications and outreach with the surrounding community, the ability for Hazen to kind of develop a rendering and a flyover of the facility so we can kind of get some visual concepts of what that's going to look like as we portray that to community members. I talked about the second part, which would be the kind of the branding of creating a logo and a brand for the facility. Our communications team is going to be taking that kind of to the next step, developing some of the more tangible materials that we can use. Part of this amendment will also include the experience design planning. So one of the concepts that we've been working on that we're pretty excited about is the ability to include kind of like an educational component to kind of highlight some of the water resources within the city and how we're really being good stewards of the environment and using those. And so this would be taking some of the experience design planning that Hazen has and bringing that and helping us kind of bring that vision to fruition. It's most of those. So the rendering and then kind of the experience design planning will be on an on-call basis. So as we need them and give them authorization to kind of provide those services. Is there any questions?
You made it so clear there are no questions, Michelle. Nice job. Yeah. How about item 8, presentation regarding the future of maintaining city street trees?
Mr. Mayor, this is a topic we're going to walk through with you in terms of something we've seen as neighborhoods have matured and some of the trees that are part of the requirements and the standards that we have in place, and as they mature, how they impact and some of the service requirements and kind of what's on the books versus what some of the practices and expectations might be. So this is really to get your wheels turning on how we might approach this over the long haul. It is a topic that has sort of evolved as we've seen more neighborhoods mature, and our team will walk you through that. So Mark, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. So we had a group of staff across the city from planning and parks, streets department, engineering, others. I'm sorry if I missed you. Start working the problems of which there are a handful of, and identifying what the specific issues are, and coming up with some alternative solutions to them. Brian Walker and Kelly Dannenfelser are going to run through this presentation with you all, and we look forward to any input you may have. Thank you.
All right. Well, good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to bring this to your attention. Next slide, please. What we're asking for is guidance on street tree maintenance in the city's right of way. Every year, the number of street trees in Franklin increases, and the trees that were planted years ago continue to grow larger and larger. As these trees grow, they require a certain level of maintenance, the same as any green infrastructure element. We also asked to look at what the city's role will be in street tree maintenance. We recognize that street trees play an important role as part of Franklin's green infrastructure. Next slide. Street trees provide a multitude of benefits to the citizens of Franklin, and several of them are shown here. They range from environmental improvements to our emotional well-being. One of the more interesting is how street trees contribute to the character of Franklin. We often hear the real estate phrase, a park-like setting, or we see images of streets that are lined with large mature trees. A healthy, well-maintained tree can provide all of these benefits for decades to come. Next slide. If you go ahead and click this 3 times, please. And what this illustrates is that the city maintains our streets, we maintain the curb and gutters, as well as the sidewalks. But oftentimes in the middle of all these things are street trees. And the street trees can and do have a major impact on the surrounding infrastructure of the streets and the sidewalks. Next slide.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to give you a little bit of history to bring you all to where we are today. Maintenance regulations in the right-of-way for planting materials began back in 1976. And in 2002, we started requiring street trees for all streets throughout the city. And by that time, many developers were already installing street trees in their neighborhoods and commercial centers because they understood the value that street trees brought to them. And then in 2008, with the major ordinance update of that year, street tree maintenance responsibilities expanded a bit. Next slide, please. And that's what we have still today. And it says that the adjacent property owner maintains the street trees, or if there's an HOA, the HOA maintains the street trees. But oftentimes we know that responsibility is passed on to the adjacent property owner anyway. But that's what we have on the books. Next slide, please. And today we are a designated Tree City USA with tree-lined streets through our neighborhoods and our commercial centers. It's an integral part of the quality of life and quality of development that we have here in Franklin. And as others have mentioned, with maturing and growing trees comes maintenance needs. And Brian's gonna take it from here to highlight some of what we're seeing.
Next slide. I also like to mention that Franklin has recently been designated again for the 15th years in a row as a Tree City USA. So we're very proud of that. From a maintenance needs standpoint, some of the issues that we're seeing are sidewalks that are being lifted by tree roots. We also see limb and vegetation that blocks sight lines or overhang streets. Proper maintenance is essential for developing a tree with a strong structure and a desirable form. When trees receive appropriate maintenance while they're young, they will require less corrective maintenance as they mature. Corrective pruning measures are what is needed most often today. And so if you'll think about it in these terms, when you drive through our community, you often see grassy fields and meadows. These grassy fields and meadows don't require a large amount of input from us, they just grow. But when you try to grow grass at a golf course or on a putting green, it now requires an increased amount of care so the grass meets the desired expectations. That same concept holds true with street trees. Trees that are in our woods and forests don't require much input from us. But when we bring those trees from the natural environment and put them into the urban environment, they now require a higher amount of input and care to meet the desired expectations. This higher level of care is not only needed for them to survive, but to thrive. Next slide. So today, property owners often contact the city with maintenance requests. And in the past, the city has assisted with citizens' requests on a case-by-case basis. Property owners often expect the city to be responsible for the street trees that are in the right-of-ways. Today, this is becoming increasingly difficult to accommodate the volume of requests without taking away from staff's normal day-to-day duties. Limbs and vegetation are having an impact on city services, and you can see some of the departments that are impacted below. Two recent examples are from SES, where a limb was interfering with a truck being able to operate its arms and be able to empty a trash receptacle. And also street sweepers are having often to move around limbs that are protruding out into the streets and blocking their normal course of path. Next slide, please. So we would like to consider some of the staff recommendations. We'd like to see homeowners associations continue to manage trees within their development. They typically have the resources and management structure to continue with this responsibility. We'd like to see the city take on responsibility of street tree management where there are no HOAs or other landscape agreements in place. And this would obviously require updating some of the municipal code and zoning ordinances accordingly. Lastly, the city has a higher duty of care for maintaining safe passage in the right-of-way. And as we discussed earlier, the city maintains the streets, curbs and gutters and sidewalks, and street trees continue to impact all of them. By the city managing the street trees, a consistent and proactive maintenance program can be established. This will lead to improved health and longevity of street trees, as well as their overall appearance, which collectively helps to define the character of an area and ultimately enhancing the overall quality of life for our citizens. Next slide, please. So with any new level of responsibility, there comes additional costs. Here are some of those costs. A three-person crew would be needed, excuse me. A three-person crew is needed to safely work along streets. This is for the pruning of trees, but is also looking for pedestrians on sidewalks and vehicular traffic control. And also an additional staff person for BNS would be needed to address increased tree-related issues that would take place inside of HOAs. This concludes the presentation. We're now happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Vice Mayor wanted to make some comments. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, this is the current issue that I'm working on. It seems some of my constituents have gotten a hold of me concerning street trees, and so has a couple of the HOAs in my ward. So last year to 2 years, we've actually been talking about this. HOA meetings have been talking about it. So a couple of things. I would suggest, number one, that the city suggest to the HOAs that they might think of partnering with the homeowners to save on cost. And some of these HOAs will take on the entire burden of the street trees within their subdivision. And sometimes I've recommended to a couple of HOAs, and they're trying to implement this, where they will partner with the HOA, with the property owner. Property owner goes out, they buy the tree and everything, and they will share the cost with them sometimes, if possible. Anyway, they're looking in, some of the HOAs are looking into partnership programs with their residents. Number two, the city takes responsibility where there's no HOA in here, as you said. So that can get cumbersome and also can be overwhelming. So I would suggest, if there are no HOAs, that we look at partnering with homeowners. And the homeowners that are outside an HOA, here's just an idea, throw it out, that they would purchase the tree from a approved list that the city provides them with. And the reason we have an approved list, because some trees are scrub trees, some are not great street trees at all, and some also have uprooting roots systems, so that we don't want that to be used because it wrecks our sidewalks. So they would get that list, and then we could partner with them, and they could purchase the approved tree, and the city could go and install it. So we know that it's installed properly, it's put in, and that would help in some instances to help get those trees in. The other thing I was going to mention, I believe that the city should continue to maintain, cut down, and plant on arterial and collector roads on the main areas. That if there is a road, and you might have one in Fieldstone, I think there's one in Sullivan Farms, and I know there are two in McKay's Mill. One would be Liberty Pike and one would be Oxford Glen. These are roads that don't actually come off of when you go in a subdivision, you don't come off that road and go into the subdivision, then come back out to that road. These are roads that actually go through subdivisions, and that multiple people use, whether they're going into the subdivision or not, they're going in and through the subdivision. A good example is McKay's Mill, because there's commercial, there's school, there's daycare centers and residentials and condos and a number of different mixed uses there. So we have an arterial road, a collector road. So right now the city maintains those two roads. The HOA maintains everything else. So I just want to throw that out there, because I know that there's some other subdivisions that have roads that do go through them that are used by city traffic. And I think we ought to continue to maintain those arterial roads and collector roads that might go through subdivisions or around and go through the subdivisions. And I talked to Lisa Clayton about that, because there were some issues that we've been having the last couple of years and talking to people about these street trees. And I'm so glad that you all brought this up. Thanks.
And Brian, thank you for mentioning that we are a Tree City USA. Who else wants to make a comment?
I do.
Alderman Blanton? Alderman Martin, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I want to commend Brian for his report and say that I'm 150% for his suggestions about hiring. I happened to be one of the ones that fell through the cracks when a huge street tree fell. It didn't fall, but it died. And I was told that we were responsible not only for the tree, but if it fell on a car and damaged the car, we would be responsible for the car and killing whoever was in the car. So we spent $1,400 to have the tree cut because the city didn't do that. I question that, because I know of people on 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue and Fair Street and West Main that have had their trees cut by the city when they died. So I happen to be one that fell through the cracks, but I would support Brian's list of hiring people and the facilities that we would need to take care of those street trees because there's no homeowners association in downtown. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, let's move on to item 9, which is update and discussion of transportation capital improvement projects.
Mr. Mayor, I'll hand this off to Paul, and I don't know if Jonathan's with us as well. This is something we talked about in terms of over the next few months, coming to you with sort of an update on the identified, prioritized, funded capital investment projects by project category, give you an update in terms of timeline and updated projected costs and potentially updated additional resources that might help us with those costs. So we're going to walk through those with a group of transportation projects that you have identified, approved, and that we have included in the CIP funding plan. So take it away, Paul.
Unfortunately, it's not Paul today. It's just me.
Sorry.
Paul is actively working to make sure his youth soccer team remains undefeated.
That's right. I knew that.
He's got important business to take care of. First project we'll mention here is 96 West Multi-Use Trail, which if you've driven that way, you've seen it's under construction. What we're showing, and I'll just kind of go over what we're showing here. So, and it's the same for all the projects in formatting, is that we're showing what the last project estimate was at the top, and that was with the 2019 CIP book being approved, and with that resolution. The number below that is, as it says, the latest estimated project cost, whether that be if we've gotten updated information or just prices have changed. Paul has gone back and tried to rework those numbers just to make sure we have the latest and greatest when we're giving this presentation. And then below that shows, working with our finance department and administration, what we think the best guess at this time on most of these, or in some cases like 96 West, what we're programming these funds, specifically the funding sources for those projects to come from. And with this particular case, and also at the bottom, before I get away from that, is a general schedule. So you'll see it broken up by year and then broken down further by quarters of the year, with the major design and construction right-of-way phases shown to the left. So with 96 West Multi-Use Trail, which is currently under construction, they're due to work on that through the end of the year contractually, and should be done with that just the first portion of next year. That is a project where we're also receiving 2 federal grants or 2 state grants of federal funds, totaling $1.8 million. Those are transportation alternative grants. And there's also about $700,000 worth of utility relocations on there. So while it's not exactly what the original project cost estimate was, it's with what we'd expect there. And those numbers are updated for the actual bid cost of the project itself. And again, we do expect that project, which is currently under construction, to be complete by the end of the first quarter next year. And please feel free to interrupt anywhere. I'll try to go through these pretty quickly. But if you have any pressing questions, please feel free to jump in. Franklin Road, another project which is currently under construction. We are contractually trying to get that project complete by late spring of next year, early spring of next year. But this project also has an incentive on it as well to try to get that project complete by the end of the year, or even earlier next year if they can't meet that initial project. And right now, the telling story of that one will really be what happens this spring as the weather's starting to get better, and early summer. We'll really be able to see how close they're going to be to getting that project done early. So, but right now they're working on utilities is what you see now. McEwen Drive interchange modifications. Nothing's physically going on out there right now, but we have ordered signal poles, and that's what this project is being phased around, is when the signal poles will be delivered to add that additional left turn lane from McEwen onto southbound I-65. So we're trying to get those poles in by late spring, early summer, and then we'll actually start the physical work on the interchange itself. And cost estimate has not changed much there.
Jonathan, can I ask you, what exactly will they be doing on the road? They don't have to add another lane there on McEwen. It's already there, correct?
The lane itself is on McEwen, and the signal infrastructure for the most part is there. Obviously, we'd have to add an additional head. The main cost of the project is actually we had to modify the ramp itself in that southwest quadrant to accept that left turn lane, the additional left turn lane. And we also had to modify the eastbound right turn lane onto the interstate to accommodate that additional turning lane for McEwen. So It's really the ramp modifications that are driving the cost of this project.
Okay. Thank you.
East McEwen Drive, so we call this one McEwen Phase 4. You can see the cost estimates over there. We're at a point now where we're doing our best to get a final cost estimate in. We are in the middle of right-of-way right now, working with the property owners. We have all of our appraisals in, and we are making offers and trying to get those closed as soon as we can. We are also working through the TDOT process on this one. So we had to get approval through every phase of that project to move forward and make sure we maintain our federal funds. And that's the big thing I would highlight on this one is the federal and state grants as they're currently listed are $22.4 million in federal funds for this project. And I wasn't sure whether to mention it or not, but I will mention it, is that we do expect to receive a bit more funding for this project when the new Transportation Improvement Program plan, the TIP plan, comes out through the MPO. So there will be some additional funding, we believe, but that hasn't happened yet. So we decided to go ahead and, for what we're showing, we'll just show what we know is what we have been granted to this project.
Well, I would say that the funding we have on here has just been amazing. But I do have one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is construction been moved to mid-2023 when construction should have started? We've talked about it all along, starting in 2022.
So the big thing has just been right-of-way drivers. There's been a lot of steps to get the right-of-way going, and we're in the middle of that process now. We do expect probably a few to go to condemnation just based on past experience. We actually had trouble locating a couple of representatives for some HOAs, but we've worked through those issues. It's really just the right-of-way that's driving that push out a little bit, and we do expect construction to be about 3 years for this project. So it's really a combination of just getting the right of way closed out and being responsible to those property owners and negotiating in good faith, and then also getting those approvals at the end of that process through TDOT to make sure we maintain that federal funds.
When the residents want to know why it's delayed to 2023 construction, I want them to know it's because of landowners and not the city.
It's just a process we work through, and it takes a while to get all the appraisals in. And as I said, we just got the last two within the last 2 months. So we're making those offers, and most of the property owners should have at least heard from us preliminarily. So we're in negotiation phases, in various phases, with just about all the property owners out there already.
But let me ask you one quick question, and then I'll be ending my question. If we have 1 or 2 property owners that hold us up and we have to go to condemnation, it was my understanding that that does not hold up the process and we can still move forward because we're going to condemnation anyway. Is that correct?
The condemnation, the actual proceedings over value or argument about the case would not. Once we get what we have to wait on is and I've gone blank. Basically, the court ordered possession is what we're waiting on. So that's just a matter of filing that paperwork with the court, going to that initial hearing, and getting that order of possession is what I was trying to think of. And then once that process, that the actual condemnation case of talking about value or whatever the property owner's contention with that property may be, that does not hold up the project. But we do have to have an order of possession in place.
I would encourage us to make sure we move fast on those from the city standpoint then. But thank you very much.
And one of the things we've tried to do with all of these projects is give you our best realistic timeline. Right away is a particularly fluid area, and we've tried to be realistic on that. Sometimes it can go a little faster if we're able to get good cooperation there, but sometimes we do have to go through the more involved condemnation process. So we've tried to be very realistic on that. There is potential that sometimes those could go a little quicker. And then you noted this too, but the federal funding here has been significant. We started out with 10 million. It's up to 22.4 million. And as Jonathan indicated, we expect to get another portion to add to that even more. So it does cause us to go through a few more hoops, but it is a significant contribution, and that partnership is really important, and it helps us stretch some of our local dollars for some other key transportation needs.
Absolutely.
And I can't thank you all enough for all the work you've done to get that funding, because I know that wasn't easy, and I know everyone worked very hard on that, Jonathan, and your department over there, and thank you, and Eric.
May I ask a more simple question?
Yes, ma'am.
Why is it not a straight line? Like, why are there two little, somebody accidentally went off the page?
Somebody can't color between the lines?
Yeah, because I'm like, wait a minute. What is that?
So part of what we're doing with that project, and right there where it says, and I'll move my mouse over that so it'll be a little more right here, we're actually realigning Road of the Round Table if you've driven out there with Players Mill. So that'll be a 4-way intersection versus 2 offset intersections.
And then further down, closer to Wilson.
And then further down to access multiple properties, and rather than put a 5-lane, this has a boulevard section style with a median that matches the rest of McEwen for access management in the future. What we're doing is actually putting a cul-de-sac on the south side that accesses 3 properties, and on the north side is a private drive with a cul-de-sac, or not private drive, but it's a public street with a cul-de-sac. So it's a shared road that all these property owners can access. So that's kind of why it looks like we colored outside the lines.
Thank you. I was like, I got to ask. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I might real quickly, I know a little bit about this federal and state funding. And I just wanted to say that it's not state that puts the onus on it, it's the federal government. And the interesting thing is the state has to go through this whole same process exactly when they build roads.
Yes, they do.
So it's not a state requirement, it's a federal requirement. You got to follow it every step of the way. You know, in fact, we've had some issues about maybe, losing our federal funding on some stuff, and right of way is a big issue. And if you don't do it right, you just don't get the money. And so, better to do it right and take an extra month or a year even in order to get 22 million or 25 million or whatever the number is, rather than try to fund it ourselves. So don't blame the state, just the federal government.
And that's a great point, though, for some of the time taken to make sure we get it right through that process and make sure that you follow all the proper policies and procedures, especially the Uniform Relocation Act with right-of-way, because what the Alderman Trower was mentioning there is that you could actually have something that you could not correct if you did the process wrong, and that funding can actually be pulled back for the entire project. You don't just lose you don't lose funding for that particular piece of property or for that particular piece of the project. You lose funding for the entire project if you cannot correct it.
And they give you very little leeway on that.
And that's an excellent point. Thank you for pointing that out. And I also just want to know that when I see 50 buses go down that road, and I sit on the edge of my seat every time it rains and hold my breath over and over and get text messages every time there's an accident on that road and a number of deaths. So, you understand, I think everyone understands why this makes me so nervous and why I'm so antsy on the edge of my seat on this project. But thank you very much. I appreciate that information, John.
Certainly. Jordan Road improvements. So from Aspen Grove Drive to Mallory Lane, it's a pretty popular little cut through in the Cool Springs area behind the movie theater there. So we've got right-of-way plans in place now. We've got about half of the appraisals in on that job, and we're working through some right-of-way changes with the plans and getting those updated to get the rest of the appraisals. But that project is on track to start construction in 2023 as well. And what you'll see, it's a pretty common theme here, is you'll see right-of-way acquisition phase taking a year or two for several of these projects, and you'll ask yourself, why does that take so long when on a project like this you may only have 8 to 10 tracks, and on some projects you'll see later you may have 2 or 3. It's just the limited number of appraisers that we have that are qualified to do this kind of work. There's a lot of limitations on staff to try to get this done. There's a lot of steps that we go through, and we try to follow as closely to that federal and any kind of guidelines that are given to us, just in case there's any potential in the future for federal funding. But in a case like this where it's unlikely we would get federal funds, we do a simple appraisal, but we still use a transportation qualified appraiser to do that. So we're comparing apples to apples, but there's just a limited number of professionals that do that amount of work. So that does carry over from project to project when you're seeing the condemnation process. That's taxing on our legal department. Certainly making offers is taxing on our staff, keeping up with that many properties. So the more projects that are in acquisition at any given time stretches that timeline out for all of them. Pratt Lane Bridge replacement. This is just a simple replacement of the dated and outdated box structure on Pratt Lane just south of Paytonsville Road. This was a commitment the city made with the Reams Fleming and Ramsey property when that came in. We've got plans, and we're about to begin the right-of-way acquisition process for that as well. This one might be of interest to Alderman Martin, the West Main Street Bridge Widening Project. We've seen that price go up. When it's just taken, if you compare it to other projects, it would be a small price, but when you have a project this small, it's a big jump. And really the big reason for that jump is once we got into the project and designed it, we really tried to make sure that it was not just a simple, we thought it was going to be a simple bridge widening, but what it ended up being was some additional shoulder work and sidewalk work to make sure that it ties in well to the adjacent properties and not just some simple, ugly looking extension to the bridge. So we are also beginning the acquisition process for those. We've got an appraiser on board, and we've just received the final documents to go ahead and get those to the appraiser for him to make an evaluation of those four parcels. So there are actually 4 parcels involved.
Oh, Jonathan. I think it's wonderful that it's on this schedule, but I know it could have been done cheaper. I know it could have been. $450,000 on the front end was a lot, and I felt you could do it for less than that, but gone up to $770,000 for a piece of metal or plywood or something to go across that stream.
Well, we're doing here, and the reason for the cost is we're actually extending that north side of the bridge. Well, it'd be the west side of the bridge, but on the picture in the north side of that bridge, so that in the future when that roadway's widened, you can still use that bridge. So we're basically building the northern half of the bridge and making sure it ties to West Main. That's really where the cost is at. Anything else you would have done there would have simply been throwaway in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
The Margaret Martin Memorial Bridge will be first class.
I was going to say the same thing, Dana.
I will hog that bridge.
I have no
that
doubt.
And the stoplight at West Haven.
Keep rolling there, Jonathan. You got a lot to go yet.
Columbia Avenue, MacHatcher Parkway. This one is a project that's been going on for several years now and is just entering. We've just received notice to proceed with the right-of-way phase. So once we get the final tweaks to the right-of-way plans, we're going to bring this back to the Board of Mayor and Alderman to show you what's going on there. The big thing before we begin any sort of negotiations, I just note there that that's heavily funded by both federal and state. If you recall there, the state agreed to pick up the 20% local match to the federal funds on that project. So actually the bulk of that project is paid by federal and state. Long Lane and Old Paytonsville Road. This is the biggest jump you're going to see from that original project estimate. And really what we're looking at here is when the project originally started, we were just building basically from, I believe that's Ellington Drive on Old Paytonsville Road just over the bridge, and just a tie-in connection here. Well, since that original design, since that original discussion back in actually, I think 2016, we added on an additional piece here. This was like a small 1,000-foot gap where the state project stopped to the south and where we were going to stop in front of the Ag Center. And also the section from Ellington Drive back to Lewisburg Pike. We've included all of this in the design, knowing that when we get to the end and get ready for right-of-way, that we'll return to the board at that time and decide if there's any way we want to phase this project to make it in more affordable chunks. So the price you're seeing would be for the entire project to upgrade everything to city standard for what we're designing. But there's definitely several options on this to do some cost saving measures in the interim. And we'll return to the board with those when we get closer to the design. The Mallory Lane, Liberty Pike intersection improvements. This is still pretty close to what we were projecting back in 2019. The designer right now is working on right-of-way plans. We've seen preliminary plans, but we haven't had the chance to see the utility impacts yet. So they're working on the utility drawings right now. So we expect to see that become more in shape and have better numbers toward the end of this year when that design comes closer to being finished. Main Street sidewalk repair project. This is one where we're a little bit delayed because of COVID last year, and we're using this year to really plan that out. And we're going to bring forward some options to the board and show you some concepts of what that refresh might look like. And then the plan is to take one block of Main Street every year and refresh that and get the ADA issues taken care of, get the brick pavers up to standard, and basically just a general refresh. Lewisburg Pike sidewalk and trail improvements, and this is the other one that's the big jump from the original project cost. If you remember, the original project request, I believe, actually came from Alderman Martin to extend sidewalk from where it ends currently on Lewisburg between Folks and Stewart down to the railroad tracks roughly, and that was what was originally approved with the CIP. And then afterwards, there were several comments about extending it down to Eastern Flank Battlefield, excuse me. And when we brought back the design, we went ahead and to look for in the future for future grant funding opportunities and things like that. We decided that it would be in the city's best interest to go ahead and design the entire thing. So the cost you're seeing there is actually to build the entire multi-use trail, which would obviously, we would recommend that get phased, starting with that first initial section and then potentially down to Eastern Flank. So that number looks big, but it's actually three separate projects is really what that would amount to. East McEwen Drive, this is what we call McEwen Drive Phase 5. This is the joint project between us and the city of Brentwood, and I believe we just had an agreement come to the board, or it's in the process of coming to the board.
We have updated that agreement, Jonathan.
We have updated. I couldn't remember whether it went through or not. Thank you, Eric. So you are aware that this is roughly a 50-50 split with Brentwood. Brentwood's actually paying a little more than 50% of this project, and Franklin is doing the other remaining portion of the project. And this extends from about a mile, 2/3 of a mile, from Wilson Pike over to the city limits. The Church Street improvements, we just recently are wrapping up and have completed wrapping up some concept drawings that we're going to bring to the board here very shortly to show a couple of different options. We promised to show you two options, one with underground electrical and one with above ground electrical as it's kind of currently today. So we look forward to bringing those back to the board and showing you what a couple of different options look like there and how that might work. So we really haven't started design, but we've started concept drawings. Carlisle Lane improvements. This is one that the primary purpose of this project is to fix the weird S curves, especially now that there's a lot of houses building up pretty close to the S curve. So that's certainly, as more houses are built out there, that project's probably going to get more expensive and require significantly more money in right of way. So that's where you see here is just some of the increased costs of that project. But it can also be phased. And again, the intent is to fix that S curve up to the intersections. So that's something where as we get design done, and it's programmed for much later in the CIP, for us to look back at if we wanted to phase that project and bite it off into smaller chunks. The McHatcher multi-use trail. So once McHatcher is open, and you got the sidewalk on Hillsborough Road, there'll be a gap from the current end of the multi-use trail right there by the animal control facility along McHatcher, soon to be replaced by the one on Old Charlotte Pike, to the section where it ends in front of the church on McHatcher. We believe this would be a great opportunity to leverage future TAP or multimodal grant opportunities when they come up and to submit. So what we've asked and what we're showing here is potentially front loading that one with design so that we are a few steps ahead with design so that we are leveraging ourselves to put ourselves in the best position to go for future grants so that we're not worried about timeline implications that come along with those grants. So this is basically the takeaway here. This is a great opportunity for future multimodal grants. Paytonsville Road and Pratt Lane realignment. This is purely development driven, as development in the area would drive this. So as traffic increases, it makes some sense to go ahead and realign that intersection, which is a pretty dangerous intersection if you have a lot of traffic on it, which luckily we don't right now. But this is something we'll look at again as we do the overall plan or growth study in the Goose Creek area. This will be something that can be looked at again as well. Again, this project was loaded toward the back end of the CIP, knowing that it was development driven. And really, I'll answer any questions about these or any other projects that I can.
Okay, we're at the witching hour. We can handle a few quick questions, but otherwise we'll break and come back for the Board of Mayor and Alderman. Good job, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor.
See y'all shortly.
Thanks.